And, of course, there's nothing better for expanding state power than waging war overseas.
You can see I'm against the telecom amnesty bill, and I don't think it's the federal government's authority to grant amnesty in this case. But it is interesting that was the one issue that could energize most actual Democratic politicians, because amnesty is one of the few things that we might object to where it actually limits the government's power. They're now for civil amnesty, which means we can't sue them, but they might criminally prosecute, but they might also not prosecute. They like the government just having this wide discretion. So even in these tiny nuggets of hope that they'll throw us and then take away, they don't want to do anything that actually reduces the police state. Like, what about amnesty for the actual government?
Right.
Why should the government get a break?
Greenwald wrote about how the amnesty part was good for latching onto because that was good for getting the publicity. That was good for, this is one particularly egregious part of this bill. Let's kill this bill. And now we saw Chris Dodd and Russ Feingold in the Imperial Senate say that they were going to filibuster this and they were going to stop it, and now they're backing down from that. And they're saying, well, we just want to get rid of the telecom immunity part. But the entire rest of it, where the president can vacuum up any phone call an American happens to make or receive, that includes somebody overseas on the other end, we'll leave that, no judicial check, completely legalizing Bush's criminal surveillance program. We'll leave all that in there, and that'll be just fine. It's just the telecom amnesty that we're opposed to now.
I do think that the corporations that are in league with the government are responsible for committing crimes and violations of our privacy. That's certainly true, and this is one area where, of course, the right is pretty weak when it comes to holding corporations accountable for actual wrongdoing. But it's funny that they only want to punish the people that were ordered and requested by the government to commit these illegal spying acts. You want to talk about amnesty, this whole impeachment thing, that's off the table.
Right, and see, I wanted to get to that, but, what about amnesty for the guy from Quest, the CEO of Quest, that refused to help the government tap his customers' phones, that they immediately, decided to indict and prosecute for insider trading and mail fraud and whatever else garbage they could try to stick on him? Mm-hmm. Persecuting a guy who refused to conspire with them to break the law and violate the rights of his customers.
Well, that's the thing. The Democrats do like to scapegoat, and there is blame to go around, but they scapegoat the corporate America. But often the worst leaders in corporate America are the ones most in bed with the state. They're often big contributors to the Democratic candidates. And so they'll attack the relatively good big businessmen more than the ones who are actually helping to enslave us.
Yeah. And now, as far as impeachment, there's a lesson that I learned, I think, in the 1980s when I was a kid during Iran-Contra. And this is something that's just been reinforced over and over again throughout my life. And that is that a president can do anything he wants on the clock, including, for example, directly violate the FISA statute in the case of George Bush, the Boland Amendment in the case of Ronald Reagan. He can have a secret war against Cambodia and Laos if he's Richard Nixon. But what he can do is commit crimes off the clock, like, lie in a deposition about a sexual harassment lawsuit or, a Watergate break-in by the campaign committee or what have you. And this is something I've seen just in the last week where people are writing about how, Bush is a war criminal. They have the paperwork now to show exactly where Bush, the rest of the principals, and all their lawyers were in on this plot to circumvent the law and have people tortured. And yet, what do we get? Well, this is a policy agreement. We don't disagreement, and we don't want to criminalize policy disagreements. And so, even though these things might technically violate war crime statutes, this certainly isn't the kind of thing you would impeach and remove people from power for, prosecute them in court for, because, what if they criminalized our policy differences when we're the ones with the power?
Sure, and it is, torture it comes up a little bit, but here's one of these very serious issues that doesn't get much light. They don't bring it up. They talk a lot more about gasoline being expensive, which is, it's important, but they don't want to talk about the really nasty stuff. They don't want to talk about people in prison. And this is one thing that I realized a while back. I thought that, the Republicans and the conservatives were worse on things like law and order and the prison state and the drug war. But in fact, the Democrats, they never make these things a campaign issue. They never complain about any of the domestic civil liberty violations either, and any of the serious ones. And I mean, here we have the biggest prison population on earth. We have a staggering incarceration rate, and they don't touch that. And actually, they promote it, and they pass laws that make the police state bigger, whether in the name of gun control or drug control. And they also support building more prisons. I know that Gray Davis, the governor here in California before Schwarzenegger took over, he was big with the prison lobby. And if they don't even care about their own constituents, the poor, disenfranchised members of their own constituents being thrown in cages for non-crime, then we shouldn't expect them to care that much about someone halfway across the world being tortured by a CIA proxy.
Right. And, speaking of foreigners being tortured and murdered and ignored by the Democrats, what about the war in Somalia? What does it get to take a hearing on that?
Well, no, exactly. But they don't even want to talk about it, right? They don't.
I'd be surprised. I would be surprised, Anthony, if more than a few members of the Democratic Party in the Congress even knew that America had a regime change operation going on in Somalia since December 2006.
No, you're probably right. I wouldn't want to bet you on that. I'd be afraid of losing. Also, as we point out, and when libertarians like to point out, that when the government does as many things as it's charged with doing, of course you can't expect legislators or the president or anyone to really keep track of it all. And yet, a war, that's a pretty big deal. There's no excuse for that. They should know about the foreign policy. Now Dodd and Feingold are saying, well, they've succeeded in delaying the FISA vote, so now that they'll have their kind of 4th of July week off, they'll have time to think about it. But do you think they spend that time thinking about foreigners being killed in Somalia or Afghanistan, or do they spend that time thinking about FISA and the Fourth Amendment? Probably not. They probably don't spend much time thinking about it at all. And, you're right about Somalia. There's Afghanistan, where now Americans are dying even more there, right, than in Iraq in the last month or so. And they want more troops there, but I don't see why.
That's the real war on terror.
Yeah, that's the real war on terror. But in terms of the supposed goals that the Americans rallied behind after 9/11, the goal of catching Osama.
Yeah.
Mr. President, in your speeches now, you rarely talk or mention Osama bin Laden. Why is that? Also, can you tell the American people if you have any more information, if you know if he is dead or alive?
Mm-hmm.
Final part here. Deep in your heart, don't you truly believe that until you find out if he is dead or alive, you won't really eliminate the threat of...
Well, deep in my heart, I know the man's on the run if he's alive at all. And who knows if he's hiding in some cave or not. We hadn't heard from him in a long time. And the idea of focusing on one person is really indicates to me people don't understand the scope of the mission. Terror is bigger than one person. And he's a person who's now been marginalized. His network is, his host government has been destroyed. He's the ultimate parasite who found weakness, exploited it, and met his match. He is, as I mentioned in my speeches, I do mention the fact that this is a fellow who is willing to commit youngsters to their death, and he himself tries to hide, if in fact he's hiding at all. So I don't know where he is. Nor, I just don't spend that much time on him. I'll be honest with you.